Hey, Frank, how are you, pal? Good to see you. Please sit down. My name's Joe Biden. I work for Lynn Rosenthal. And good to see you again. Good to see you. I am an unadulterated fan, as I told you at my house. And hey, it's great to be with you all. And Madam Secretary, it's good to be with you. This is an example of how we want to make this a government-wide obsession to deal with this issue of violence against women. You know, we knew, and I see so many familiar faces here, we knew, and a lot of you were there then, we knew before we held our first hearing on violence against women on June 20th, 1990, that we had an epidemic on our hands. We knew it. The problem was no one wanted to believe it. The problem was we knew that this violence was extensive, and we knew we had to convince our colleagues in the House and Senate, and quite frankly, the American people, because this was the dirty little secret that everybody kept. Nobody talked about it. We knew we had to let the American people know the scope of the problem if we had any chance of making any progress. So I turned to my staff, a group of very talented women and men, mostly women at the time, and I asked, what could we do? Anybody have any ideas? And one of my staff members said, you know, we should come up with a report. And it later became known as, the report was called The Violence Against Women, A Week in the Life of America, in which we detailed not just gave a number, detailed 21,000 crimes against women that were reported in 1 week and every week in America. These stories were as powerful as they were tragic. The woman whose boyfriend was angry, I can't remember, it was because she didn't cook the meal on time or didn't wear the right skirt or whatever it was, literally held her arm out and broke her arm with a hammer. The woman whose father had beaten her with a lead pipe in the head because she disappointed him. The 15-year-old girl who was stabbed by her ex-boyfriend on the very day he was released from jail, all in one single week. And quite frankly, once the American people found out how bad it was, once we were able to communicate this notion to our colleagues, I was absolutely confident we could get something done about it. But it took a long time. The thing I'm proudest of in my career, and not that I've done all that many special things, but the thing, if I did not another thing in my life and never did another thing before, doing the Violence Against Women Act was the single most significant thing I've ever been part of in my life. And that's a fact. That's a fact. Folks, look, folks, you all are the reason why it happened. I look out there, if I start naming names, I'm going to get in real trouble. But I look out there and see so many of you who felt as passionate about this that I did. So many of you have asked me 1,000 times, is my passion born out of the fact that, like Joe Torre, my mother was beaten, or my daughter, or my wife, and thank God I didn't have that. I just had a righteous father who thought the cardinal sin any man or woman could commit was the abuse of power. Raising your hand was the ultimate abuse. It was a man raising his hand to a woman or a child. Ladies and gentlemen, we made a lot of progress in the last 16 years, and we're proud of that as well. We significantly, you significantly reduced acts of domestic violence. We created partnerships between federal, state, and local authorities. And we set up the National Domestic Violence Hotline, a hotline that unfortunately to this day still has to answer 22,000 calls per month. Imagine the courage it takes to make that call. Imagine the courage it takes to be in a corner. And I've gone down and listened to the calls. It goes like, is anyone there? My name is, I live. Oh my God, I'm afraid he's going to come in. Oh my God, can you help me? I love these guys who talk about courage. That takes real courage, man. And 22,000 women a month pick up the phone and ask for help. And how many thousands more never get a chance? Over the last 2 decades, we've learned an awful lot together. One of the most important things we learned is we have to do more to help victims stay safe. Once they've outed themselves, once they've come out and said, I need help, Joe, keeping them safe is hard, really hard. We need to provide legal protections for victims at the time they need it most. The most dramatic violence, the most dramatic violent murders occur shortly after the victim tries to leave. That's the most dangerous moment. That's the moment, you all know this, I'm preaching to the choir here. And we need to pick up on the warning signs, much better than we have thus far. There have been moments when the system could have worked better, when lives could have been saved. We know this because of what happened to a woman like Dorothy Cotter, who was 35 years old, a compassionate, beautiful woman, mother of 2 young daughters. She had suffered years of severe abuse at her husband's hands. Years. Dorothy's case had all the warning signs of homicide. Jenny Krieger of Newburyport, Massachusetts, where Dorothy sought help, wrote a note in their file when she went in. They said, quote, very lethal case was the quote on the file. But they didn't have the tools to coordinate with the police and the courts. After Dorothy's husband shot her, the Crisis Center made a commitment, not only to screen every single woman for the warning signs, but also to bring everyone together to interrupt that cycle of escalating violence. And that's how it goes. It escalates. It's kind of like drug addiction. It escalates. It never stays the same. There have been no domestic homicides in that community since that project began. We need to replace what we've been doing and replicate this kind of success. The Justice Department gets this. Today, they've released a new tool to help everyone who comes in contact with a victim to screen for these warning signs and to coordinate to keep these victims safe. They're making this a priority, and because of it, we're going to be able to literally save thousands of lives. You all know this. This is one woman at a time. This is one individual at a time. But it's not just detecting the warning signs. Research tells us that effective legal representation is the single most important factor in whether victims are able to escape this domestic violence cycle. Yet studies estimate that less than 1 in 5 low-income victims of domestic violence ever get to see a lawyer. That's why I worked so hard with Larry Tribe, not only down here, but before I got here as a lawyer, setting up, trying to get 100,000 lawyers to volunteer. But Larry Tribe's one of the great legal minds in the country. Larry Tribe's Access to Justice team was working on bringing together law firms, domestic violence agencies, and law school clinics to help represent these victims. Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans, and the folks in Baltimore have taken this idea and they've run with it. And I want to see other communities take it on in the same way. We need to use the talents of people who really want to help, especially lawyers who want to volunteer, and there are thousands who want to volunteer. As a lawyer, I believe that the privilege of practicing law is not just a profession, but a calling to fight for justice and those who need the help the most, not just a transactional business. It should be more than that, and it is for so many. It is more than that. We just have to give them an outlet. The challenge facing victims of domestic violence is not just protection orders, but custody and family law as well. We need more resources than the government can possibly provide. You are an example of the incredible resources we have. Imagine were you not all here. No matter what the government did, no matter how much money we spent, we would have not made 1/10 the progress you've made. Today, I am literally calling on lawyers everywhere. Join us. Join us. You will never be more satisfied. You will never feel more rewarded. You will never, never, never feel better about what you've done than if you join us. I've worked with the ABA Commission on Domestic Violence to make sure they can connect the thousands of victims, and there's thousands, who need the help of a lawyer with an able lawyer who's willing to provide that help. This is about getting people together. And I know no group in the world is better connected than the outfit sitting in front of me, man. I learned the lesson of your connectivity. You think I'm joking? I'm not. You think I'm joking? I'm not. So look, improving the legal system's response is also critical in reducing rape and sexual assault. Think about this in this great nation of ours. 1.1 million women are the victims of rape each year. 1.1 million. And while these individual acts of violence may last only a moment, although some last much more, the impact on the victim can and often does last a lifetime. These women are suffering. Rape victims are 13 times more likely to attempt suicide. We owe these women. We owe these women justice. We owe these women more than a fair trial against their accuser, against the man they accuse. We owe them. And look, we can start by getting rape kits off the shelves. I spent much of my career in the United States Senate seeing to it that we financed these rape kits and we changed the way we investigate crimes and all the things we've done together. But tens of thousands of them sit on shelves. You know, there are studies showing that we did trial studies when I was in the Judiciary Committee, just only 5 years ago, showing that if we just went out and found out we got the DNA response and identification from those rape kits, Joe, we could in fact solve up to 60% of the rape crimes because a lot of these guys are sitting in prison. And you guys know better than I do. The only final closure is when a woman knows that the man who raped them has been identified and that the world knows that man raped them. And so, folks, today the National Institute of Justice is taking this problem head on. By helping communities track and test this evidence, we're going to get rapists off the streets. Now, of course, ending violence against women is not just a problem of laws and legislation. You all know that better than I do. It's not just about the criminal justice system. It's about attitudes. It's about attitudes. Attitudes that unfortunately remain deeply embedded in our culture. As Lynn and others of you know, what really got me started in this was a poll done in Rhode Island a long time ago, showing that the response of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to issues about how is appropriate to treat women. Well, guess what? 2009, we have another study of 6th graders. It found that 1/4 of them thought it was acceptable for boys to hit their girlfriends. Folks, this is like cutting grass. You don't ever solve it. You have to keep at it. Keep at it. And we've all learned that. We hoped differently, but it's not the way it works. In that recent study of college students, 26% thought, quote, some women who are abused secretly want to be treated that way. Say it again, 26%. 26%. College students said, some women who are abused secretly want to be treated that way. It's sick. Folks, until we change these attitudes, and until we reverse the deeply held cultural assumptions, we're not going to be fulfilling the promise we made to our daughters and our granddaughters when Frank Lautenberg and I and others first got involved in dealing with domestic violence and sexual abuse. It's not about reducing it. It's about ending it. It's about ending it. And with all your help, I think we're going to get there. I know it. But there is no way we could do any of this without the leadership of the man I'm about to introduce.